So we're going to do a solvent removable visible penetrant examination on this piece of flat hardware. The first thing we want to do is to make sure that the part is clean, that there are no burrs or grease in the area of interest. As you can see, this part is nice and clean. So we're going to first apply a cleaner remover to a lint-free rag. It's important to have your PPEs available. If you are allergic to some of the chemicals in the cleaner, you want to be sure you use appropriate PPE. This will be found online on the MSDS for this particular solvent. I'm not allergic, but I will use this. We're going to allow the solvent to evaporate for approximately 5 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to agitate the penetrant, make sure it's good and mixed up in there. As you can see, when I was cleaning this part, I made sure I had all the areas of interest clean. At the same time, I was looking at the surface to make sure there were no outstanding defects that you could see visually before the penetrant examination began. The purpose of a penetrant examination is to look for surface defects that are open to the surface only. You want to be very cautious with penetrant. It can cover a lot of surface area with a very small amount of penetrant. It can make a really big mess, and you will be wearing penetrant for days if you get it on you. So you spray a little bit into a cup or a container. It doesn't take much, and as you can see already, just by spraying it into the cup, I have it all over my hands. So use caution. The next step is to take your penetrant, dip your swab into the penetrant, and liberally apply the penetrant to the surface of the part. It's supposed to flow freely over the surface of a part or an indication or an area of interest freely. You want to make sure when you're applying your penetrant that you cover at least a ½ inch outside the area of interest. For example, here's a weldment on a nipple. I've made sure I had the penetrant to the toe of the weld and at least a ½ inch on the outside of that weld. So now, according to our specification, we will be waiting for 15 minutes while this penetrant sets on the surface of the part. That time is called a dwell time. The next thing we want to do after we've waited for 15 minutes is to clean the surface of the part. The first thing you want to do is to remove the excess manually, just with a nice clean lint-free cloth. Get as much of the penetrant off the surface of the part as you can. Try not to smear around too much. One thing to remember when you are looking at your part to determine if you can actually perform a penetrant examination is to be sure that the part is clean, there's no corrosion on the surface or rust, that there's not a lot of grease or scale. If you're working on welds, make sure that all the slag is removed and that you have access to the 100% surface of the area of interest. Another note that is important is you want a lot of nice white light. You want at least 100-foot candles on the surface of the part at 12 inches. It is normal to have a white light meter with you and to actually measure the surface, measure the white light at the surface of the part, as you want to annotate that on the report that you're going to be filling out. You have areas of interest here that need to be filled out with your report. It'll ask you for the remover you're using, solvent remover you're using, the penetrant type that you're using, and the developer that you're using. It'll ask you for the type of material that's being tested, the amount of time that you allow the penetrant to remain on the part, the amount of time you allow the developer to stay on the surface of the part, what is white light intensity, etc., etc. So make sure you fill this out as you go along. The next thing we're going to do is remove the remainder of the penetrant from the surface of the part. And again, I'm going to apply my mask. Find a nice clean corner of your rag. You don't want to spray this remover on the part itself, because you don't want to flush any of the remaining penetrant off any possible indications that might be on that part. As you can see, there's still penetrant that remains on the part. And that's because those are areas where the penetrant has, by capillary action, seeped into the areas that might be indications and will remain on the part until we spray some developer on there. The developer has a wicking action, much like a sponge, that will pull, allow the penetrant to be soaked up into it like a sponge will work. And you'll see that happen in a moment. What you need to do now is allow any of the cleaner remover that is left on the part to vaporize. Okay, so we've cleaned the surface of the part, we've applied penetrant, and now we're going to apply some developer. This is pretty much a white powder in aerosol form, specifically built to, or mixed to work efficiently with penetrant, to allow the penetrant to wick out of any indications that may still be on the surface of the part. When you apply developer to the surface of the part, you don't want to get on top of the part with your nozzle and just spray into the part. You want to apply your developer in a nice feathering fashion. For example, make sure it works first, that you got your developer coming out, and then apply your developer this way. As you can see, the developer is starting to coat the surface of the part where we had the penetrant applied. So we're going to coat the weld first. And then around this one. Make sure you have a nice even coat, but not a heavy coat, because you don't want to blast out the indications. So we've waited for 15 minutes, and the next step is to look at the surface of the part and see if we have any bleed out. That's the technical term that's used when you have penetrant that weeps out of an indication on a part. This specimen really doesn't have a lot wrong with it, fortunately, as it is flight hardware, but we do have a few small surface indications. That's right at 1/8 of an inch, and other than that we really don't see a whole lot, so that's good. Now we have found these indications, and that does not mean that the part has failed. All that means is we have found some surface indications that will be annotated on the report. Normally, when you have a part like this that has several welds, you will note that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 circumferential welds and 2 nipple welds, and you'll write those on the part. The next step is to remove the developer. What you normally do is you wipe off the excess first, because you really don't want to waste your solvent remover on this, because you pretty much just wipe it off as it is. It's like a light talcum when it comes off. Make sure it falls onto a protective cover or a lint-free cloth. You don't want it to fall down into your clean room. You don't want to get it all over the floor of your client's or your requester's office or warehouse, because once it gets to the floor, any penetrant gets to the floor, it will stay there forever. If it gets into concrete, it won't come out. The developer is not so bad, but the penetrant will stay.